Hello and welcome to a brand new show for weekends on Big Centre TV. The week is all about taking a look at some of the big talking points from across our region over the past 7 days. We'll be chatting with studio guests, we'll be reviewing the headlines in the local papers, and we'll be serving up a few ideas for leisure time in our Something for the Weekend section. Remember, this is your show, it's you that makes the news. It's us that just talk about it. So if there's an issue you think we should be tackling, well, drop us a line. You can reach us on the Big Centre TV website, on Facebook, or by dropping an email to our new address, theweek@bigcentre.tv. Now, my first guest certainly knows a thing or two about the headlines and deadlines business, so I think he's the ideal candidate to kick things off. Lee Southen's the director of Connect PR, the award-winning media agency based in Wolverhampton. Lee, thank you for being our debut victim on this brand new table in the studio.
Absolute privilege. Really pleased to be here. Thanks, Carl.
Lee, tell us a bit about you first and the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you say, I'm a director at Connect PR. I've been with the agency now for 8 years. We're located in an iconic building in Wolverhampton. Anyone who knows the city will know the famous Chubb buildings. We're a 20-strong team who are really passionate about what we do. And for us, it's all about hitting the headlines for our clients nationally and regionally. And that's us in a nutshell, really.
So actually monitoring what goes on in the not just local media, and the national or regional media is key to understanding the sort of things journalists want.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, we've got our fingers on the pulse daily in terms of, what's going into these kind of media environments, and the important role that social media is now playing and online media, which is a critical part of all of our communications.
Well, I think we'll see when we get round to chatting about some of the headlines. Some of the stories we talk about tonight are in the printed version of newspapers. Yeah. Some of them have made the headlines online, and that's sort of the way things go, isn't it?
Well, that's it. And a lot of the stories I think we're going to talk about today, we've actually heard about online first, as opposed to in the traditional way of picking up your local paper at your local newsagents and seeing what makes that front page story.
The thing is, people want their news instantly now, straight away, don't they? They expect, in the world of Twitter, in the world of Facebook, they expect that, as soon as something's happened, they look online and they expect to see something about it.
This is it, absolutely.
And that's just something that the traditional newspapers can't always compete with. So they go down a different route, don't they? And they look at stories a bit more behind the stories behind the stories, maybe.
That's it, and I think newspapers are having to change the way they operate, and we're certainly seeing that with some of the big regional titles, how they're shifting towards more of an online presence, and I think that's important for every kind of brand moving forward.
Well, the idea of this first part of the show every week is to take a little look at some of the stories that have been making the headlines around the region this week, and I know the two of us have got our heads together a little bit beforehand with some a real eclectic mix, I hope. The first one is a story that the Express and Star picked up on this week. Now, there are a lot of people who own dogs in our region, and a lot of them will be taking their dogs for a walk on Cannock Chase.
That's right.
I have done in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe not so keen now that a gentleman called Ken Birch reckons that his 2 Springer Spaniels have been bitten by a vicious snake. One of the spaniels died, and the other one was seriously hurt. People don't think about that.
Well, no, it's terrible news to hear that one of these spaniels had actually died as a result of this snake bite, and it's not something you think of, when walking around Cannock Chase, that these kind of reptiles will be in the lavender fields. I think in this situation, I think what's important here though is obviously adders are an important part of the ecology, and I think. Like the gentleman said, I think moving forward, he'll make sure his dog is firmly on a lead and certainly won't be dancing through the lavender fields as freely as he has been doing before. I
mean, there are some people, it's another issue, isn't it? There's some people who maybe not quite so keen on dogs, who believe that dogs should always be on a lead, don't they? So
that's it. I mean, my daughter alone, she's only 4 years old, and she's absolutely petrified of dogs. And we often walk down the canal where I live, and when we see a Staffordshire Bull Terrier bounding towards us, you do start to think, that dog really should be on a lead as such. But it's a very controversial subject. We're a nation of dog lovers, and obviously a very tragic case that's happened here in Cannock Chase. I mean, and I think there's just a level of education that needs to go about. These animals are obviously there; they exist. I think the dog has obviously startled this snake, which has made it strike out. And I think there's just a level of education. We need to be aware of these animals and the danger that they potentially could present.
I think it's the same. It's a bit of common sense,
isn't
it, really? But I think there's just this feeling, isn't there, that Britain doesn't have snakes.
Yeah, this is it. But they are there, and like I said, they're an important part of our habitat. And we should all be aware of their presence.
I know the advice from vets and some of the wildlife experts that were talking about this subject is that maybe between now and perhaps end of September, early October, is the time when dog owners are probably most at risk, and then they start to go into hibernation. Not the dog owners, the snakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in this instance, I think the snake might have been breeding at the time, and the dog has obviously maybe trodden on the snake or something, which has made it have that reaction.
Somebody trod on me and I was in the heather having a doze.
Absolutely,
I'd probably
you'd have
bite
the same reaction.
as well.
Same
I mean,
reaction.
this happened around the German cemetery area, but I think the feeling is it doesn't have to be Cannock Chase. It's any kind of wildlife areas that this will happen.
Absolutely.
So the message is be careful and be sensible,
Common
isn't it?
sense, absolutely.
So I mean, Sutton Coldfield Observer rather had a heartbreaking story, a human interest story. This one. Different environment completely, because this is right in the middle of the town centre. What local newspapers I think are really great at is taking a heart-rending tale of a tragedy through no fault of someone's own.
Yeah.
And this is where they can fulfil possibly a really good service, because Pat Bigham from College Hill has lost 3 of her precious rings that meant absolutely everything to her in Sutton Town Centre a few weeks back. Visiting the bank and the hair salon, going about our own business. We've all been there, haven't we? You know, some kind of little pouch or something you pull out of your pocket isn't there when you get home. Have you ever done that? Have you ever got back and thought, where's my,
no, I haven't actually, but I'm
my...
always losing my wedding ring or my car keys or my wallet, which I think most men do. And now I always try and keep them in the same place so I know where they are, because I can only imagine what this poor lady is going through. Absolutely heart-wrenching, these treasured items that have gone missing. And
it was her engagement ring, her eternity ring, and the golden wedding ring that her husband had bought her as well.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the value, they're just irreplaceable, aren't they?
Oh, and it's the memories that those possessions hold. And I think she's appealing now for anyone who finds this little blue satchel to get in touch so those items can be returned. And let's hope, they are found and can be returned to the rightful owner.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the Sutton Coldfield Observer's got all the information about that, so if anyone has got information, I'm sure that Pat would be most grateful to hear.
Absolutely.
One of the ones, I mean, sticking just with the Express and Star a little bit briefly here, this story in Thursday's paper caught my eye on the front cover. Dozens of cigarette lighters inside a clutter-strewn house that's destroyed in a blaze. I mean, we see these TV documentaries now, don't we, about hoarders, the hoarders inside.
Yeah.
This is a reminder of actually, not that it's just some kind of addiction that people have, but the dangers that it can cause from a health and safety point of view.
Well, absolutely. I don't know if you remember Mr. Trebus from Life of Grime, a BBC show.
Yes.
And his house, you couldn't move for the mounds of newspapers and rubbish that he had collected. And absolutely, it presents a real danger. And as shown in this story highlighted on the front page.
Well, they reckon that the fire service reckon it's in Nechel's Lane in Wensfield, this is. They probably had at least 60 cigarette lighters among the various boxes in there. One quick health and safety audit would have told you that's probably not the greatest idea.
And again, like the previous story, common sense. Common sense should prevail here and tell us we don't store all of this, paraphernalia. Yeah.
But common sense breaking out is no good.
No,
it doesn't sell papers.
This is it, absolutely.
Talking of hoarding, this next story maybe takes us to the next stage of if you've got a lot of hoarded rubbish in your house and you're looking for somewhere to get rid of it. A growing number of people in the region decide that they can, when they think no one's watching, just tip it in a lay-by somewhere or chuck it over a fence. Interesting in the Walsall Advertiser this week, this story about Neil Brooks from Blakely Lane in Bloxwich, who's been fined over £1,700 after being filmed illegally dumping 2 bed bases, 2 mattresses, out loading it off a Ford Transit lorry. I think it worked out, it took him 22 seconds to offload it, so they said that cost him in the end about £80 a second. There'll be people cheering from the rooftops.
There will be indeed, and I'm glad in this occasion the councillors actually took action and decided to fine someone for fly tipping. We need to make an example of these people because it's the only way we're going to stop them from actually fly tipping.
But how many times, do you drive out to a beauty spot, an isolated beauty spot, and you find that someone's just dumped the entire contents of their
fridge, freezers, mattresses, tyres, you name it, you see it all. I mean, I caught a guy actually on my estate who was fixing just a rear light of his car, and he looked around to make sure was anyone looking. No one was. We'll just dump it over the fence. And it's that kind of, behaviour that is kind of plighting some real beauty spots across the whole of the region.
And at least this does just prove, if someone happens to capture some evidence on a smartphone or whatever, that the police, the councils, they will take action.
The fine is there, so, advice that don't fly tip.
Well, the council say here, the success of this case has shown that Walsall Council does not take the issue of fly tipping lightly. I think that's probably an understatement. I don't think Mr Brooks will be doing it.
No,
again,
indeed. I don't think he'll think twice about it, will he?
I mean, there is an issue that the number of local recycling sites in some parts of the region have been cut back, or their opening hours have been reduced, which doesn't help, does it?
No, it doesn't help. And also rubbish collection. I think because of budget cuts, etc., collections are less frequent than they used to be. But it doesn't take much. If you've got a spare mattress or if you've got that fridge freezer, just to call someone to come and collect that and safely dispose of it.
Absolutely.
It's a bit of time and effort really to do that.
And responsibility, community responsibility, isn't it as well? This was one of the most emotive stories, probably one of the most commented upon stories this week, was in the Birmingham Mail, the story of a heavily pregnant woman who revealed she was forced to stand on a train from Birmingham after businessmen refused to get out of her pre-booked seat.
I mean, it's outrageous.
You can picture the scene, can't you? She's stunned that this man in a suit. She says, "Do you mind? I've got my ticket here," and he just laughs in her face. She's 29 years old. She's 34 weeks pregnant, and is forced to stand for over half an hour.
Absolutely, I just think these kind of stories, when you hear about them, they're just beyond belief. How can someone actually sit in that chair and not move when you see the lady is 8 months pregnant, as it was? Not all of us, unfortunately, will scream from the rooftops, but in this situation, this gentleman in question should have been embarrassed, and someone should have intervened and asked him politely to stand there.
I think the thing is, I remember, when I'd be going to, I used to catch 2 buses to go to school.
Yeah.
And if an adult, or certainly a lady, stepped onto the bus, you were just brought up to stand up and give them your seat. Whether you've got a pre-booked ticket or not. Yeah. It's just.
Again, it's just politeness. It's the way we would like our community to behave, to respect others, and absolutely. I remember catching the bus when I was a child, and my mum always used to make me stand up if, it was a packed bus, and if it was a lady just stand up, or an elderly lady, or anyone. You just go about your way, and that's what you do,
There seems to be, doesn't there? With several other stories that you see now, just an example of people who have a total lack of respect for authority, even an acknowledgement of authority. They don't think that rules apply to them. No,
this is it, and I think this is something that we need to look at moving forward to kind of curtail this kind of behaviour.
What you really though need is somebody to find who that person was, in exactly the same as with the fly tipping issue. Find that person, bring them to justice, make an example of them, so that other people realise.
Well, this is it. Well, I think I saw this article. I think it spread nationally, and I think it'd gone in the Daily Mail. And the reporter in question was actually, if you know of this gentleman, send his details in. We want to name and shame, this gentleman.
And quite right, and that's where social media actually can be quite good, isn't it? 'Cause that's the sort of thing where it spreads like wildfire. Someone probably took a photograph of this person, presumably. I
would have thought so.
On a phone somewhere or something like that. So yeah, let's hope that one follows the fly tipping rule. A sad note this week, of course. We talked about the changing role of local newspapers this week. Is that one of the West Midlands newspapers is going to be closing. Trinity Mirror's announced the closure of its 19th local newspaper in the space of a year. The last edition of the Nuneaton Tribune is going to be put out on the 24th of September, and the publisher says it won't have any impact on jobs, but it is nevertheless a sign, isn't it, that the way we soak up and receive our news is changing.
Unfortunately so, and I think this is very sad news indeed. I think for the whole of the industry, and it's not news that we want to see. Like you say, the positive side of this story is that no jobs have been lost as a result of this paper closing down. But like you say, it is a sign of the times, when we, for example, send out a press release, it's not just a bog standard text document anymore. It's evolved, that it's accompanied by a photograph. Video news now is equally as important as the written word. It's providing all of that content to feed as many channels as we possibly can. And like you say, it is sad news, and hopefully other newspaper groups will take notice of this and adapt and change the way that they operate.
I think a lot of probably the number of people that read what newspapers are writing these days is arguably greater than it's ever been. It's just that they're not all doing it in the printed format,
Absolutely.
Isn't it? So a sad note though. A story on the front of the Staffordshire newsletter over there that caught my eye. Gridlock fury on the M6. Now I didn't think this was news. There's always gridlock on the M6.
And it's been going on for absolutely ages. And I think anyone who uses the M6 tears their hair out. I mean, I avoid it like the plague where I can, but unfortunately, sometimes you just have to take it. And it just seems to be months and months of misery.
There's the gridlock up in Stafford. There's the M5, M6 junction closed, which let's just hope that is coming near to
Wow,
an end.
let's hope, pray, because I noticed there was a protest group at the Wednesbury junction trying to get that slip road open because it's just causing so much traffic.
Fingers crossed that it does.
Fingers
Steve,
crossed.
thank you so much. That's an optimistic note. Thank you for
Absolutely.
coming in. Lots more to come on the week. Stick with us because after the break we'll be talking fashion and lots more with a Birmingham high flyer who used to be a corporate lawyer and has now launched his own fragrance company. Stick with us after the break. Welcome back to The Week, our new Friday night show, taking a look at the big talking points around the West Midlands. Now, this is the time when you'll probably wish you had smelly vision, because my next guest is the chief executive of a British-made men's fragrance brand called Groom. To tell us more about it, here's Rob Hallmark. Rob, thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
It
Cole.
is smelling mighty fine in the studio tonight. Thank you very much.
Glad to hear that.
Now, is it fair for me to say that you are not a businessman that's taken an orthodox route towards this?
I think it would be fair. I couldn't necessarily be the best judge of how fair that is because it's just been my experience. But from the outside in, I think people would certainly have some interesting inputs on how I've gone about it. But
because you trained as a lawyer, didn't you? I mean, that's how you began your career.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people traditionally would say lawyers wouldn't necessarily become businessmen. The accountants, financial advisors have such a good grasp on numbers, they can often integrate into the business community quite quickly. I think lawyers have a reputation being risk averse, slow to react, take their time, plan, plot, look at the downsides in such a degree that it would be hard to get moving. But I think in this era, I think law's been a really good background for me. I found it quite useful because there's so much regulation out there for a small business to start up in. I can just read the language, and a lot of it for me, even if it's not something I practiced, makes sense. So I'm quite grateful. I think I've saved myself a few fees along the way.
Well, and when you're setting up any kind of business, the amount of paperwork, contracts that you've got to know your way around without the need to employ advisors and outsiders, then it's prices, isn't it? So take us back to the beginning then. I mean, you're based in Birmingham.
Yep.
But you trained as a lawyer, was it in Durham you went up to?
Yeah, I did my law degree up in Durham. So my family all have lawyers in it. The father, his brother, my grandfather. We had a small practice in Worcester, which carried the family name. So I grew up with it. And I think that's partly why I was looking for change. It felt like I'd already lived my life as a lawyer. The old man worked long days, long weeks, long hours. I was involved in that as a family. We'd often have clients around. So there was always a part of me that thought, do I want to repeat the Groundhog Day effect of having another career, having seen so much of it growing up. So business for me was a real antidote to all of that. So having finished at uni, I was looking at my options. I wanted to see a bit more of the world. I knew what being a lawyer involved. It's hard work and it's full commitment. So an opportunity came up to do some travelling, and that took me out to Thailand. So there's a chance to do some work out there with the law firm. And I got to meet really interesting people. It really opened my eyes that we spent a lot of time with the British embassies, meeting people in business, and I got a buzz from it. So business for me became more about networking. The idea didn't matter. I met people doing all sorts out there. I got a really good buzz from that community. And as I came back to do my law finals, I don't think that trip ever left me. It was always in the back of my mind going, that was good fun, being out there, in that community.
But you went on to work at law firms in mainly the Birmingham area then for 6-7 years after that?
Yeah, so things sort of had a bit of a natural progression for me. And Steve Jobs made an interesting comment when he was speaking once. It's hard to join the dots looking forward. Joining the dots looking back is a lot easier. So as I look back now, there's a bit more sense to what I was doing. I got a job with a local firm, Martineau's, well regarded, and I thought I had a job in the hand, made sense, let's take it. And after a couple of years it was good. I got another offer to join another firm, went there, recession hit, panic, sat down, sort of, right, better get on with this now, like it or not. And that brought me into some other opportunities that came along. But I had a trip to France, which was the curveball. I went out there with some friends, just a holiday. And one of the guys on the trip wanted me to join him and go and get some fragrance for his other half back in England. So along I went. He had the only car on holiday, so we didn't have much choice. Drove out with Tom to a town called Grasse, which happens to be the world's fragrance capital.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we met this delightful old lady. She was running a shop. I didn't have much to do at the point, so I was talking to her about it. And I said, how's all this work? Fragrance fascinated me because it's one of those products I've seen all around in life, but not been a big consumer of it. It didn't quite click. It didn't have that buying pull that I felt it should, given what it sells around the world. So I asked her more about it and said, well, how does all this work and where does it come from? She said a lot of it comes from Europe, particularly France. So I thought it was interesting. It was quite local. And, you know, we talked about the cost of putting it together and how it worked. And actually, she ran a shop with just 2 of them. So I had this vision that fragrance took huge resource, big teams. So it was interesting. She had incredible knowledge, and I really got absorbed, distracted, if you like, in how much passion she had for putting a fragrance together.
And
so,
while you were doing that, was it going around in your mind then? Actually,
Yeah.
I could do this.
Well, at that point, it hadn't quite clicked. But I came away from that trip being surprised that, you know, the retail price we saw in the UK and the work that goes into it. So for me, it became a product with aesthetics. And years down the road, I was always enjoying the idea of being creative. You know, my pastimes would be carpentry and things like that. So it always occurs to me getting into business, the earlier ideas, it's margin. You've got to make money to survive in business. You can't just say, this is a great idea and I'll work out how to monetize it later. But people like Google did that, famously, and people think they can copy Google, but they had millions behind them and had a great core idea. So for me, I had to have an idea that could monetize itself early on. So that the fragrance sort of cropped into my head as I kind of struck off other ideas. So I got into the market. I started thinking about it. And the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it, and the more it kind of won me over. So I think it was quite useful. I was a cynic. I was like, this isn't a product for me. This is something I don't need in my life. And that hasn't changed. But what has changed
that can make you quite cautious sometimes, can't you, that attitude?
And I noticed how I was getting drawn into it. So I thought, actually, there's a big market out there that don't include this in their routine. So the nature for groom was to expand the grooming routine. Now, guys, thank God, you know, we're showering, we're moisturising, you know, we're getting into it. It's like we are gradually adding more into that routine. So fragrance was something that was missing for me. You know, there's no point just bringing out shower gels; they're already out there. And the more I got into it, the more I thought I enjoy having this. You know, probably like as it was introducing mint to your toothpaste once upon a time. It was the same buzz, and I thought, I'm really enjoying this. If I can take that feel-good factor and introduce it to more people, then we've got a business here. And that was...
I mean, we've all seen in programs, I mean, like The Apprentice, it's become one of the stock in trade tasks. Take create a fragrance, and you can see the massive pitfalls. You know, it is a science, isn't it? I mean,
there's a lot to it, and I've met some really interesting people along the way, experts in their field, who have huge hesitation about doing this. And I think it was useful to meet them at sort of year 2, getting into year 3, not at month 1 or month 3, because I think they could have had the potential to talk me out of it. But I do like a challenge. You know, I like the frothy water, full of activity. A lot of people want to start a business in what they call the blue water, where it's clean and empty and spacious, and I think that's because it's been borrowed from tech. You know, in tech it's very hard to go up against an established idea. It has been done. Facebook wasn't the first for social media, Google wasn't the first search engine, but they're exceptional stories. So people always try and look for a quiet place to have a business, but it could be there's a market there. You know, what I loved about the fragrance market, it was big, it was competitive. I was in my 30s, I thought this might take 20 years to become a household name, but with perseverance, hard work, and just some gut instinct pushing you, that excited me. You know, I'd love to get in that market.
So how long from the time when you first came up with the idea and to where we are today?
We'll be at year 3 in January, and it started with the branding first. We had some ideas which were meant to be short term. Just let's have a bit of fun. Let's see if we can do a few pilot projects first. And as I started speaking to people got more into the idea, and they said, actually start doing this seriously. So then I started researching, actually, not fragrance brands, because there aren't that many trying to be big. There are some big fragrance houses which have been spun out from perfumers from big brands, so Tom Ford, ex-Gucci. There are some niche brands from a perfumist who deliberately want to stay small, but you know, I wanted to start small but grow really big.
So how do you describe the fragrance you've come up with then? Somebody says, right, what's groom?
Well, what I wanted for our first range is to create an extension of the grooming routine. So for me, it's got a fresh impact. The minute you wear it, it's got to make you feel good. You know, it's got to have that 5 seconds of I'm going out to work, I'm going out for a drink. This has to have an instant impact. Some fragrances take a while to settle, and that's because they have more fragrance oils in them, and they'll change against the chemical of the skin, as will groom, but it had to have that instant grab, you know, it has that immediate hit. So you're going to get the citrus to start with, that's going to kick in first, and then we go into some deeper, woodier, muskier notes. What I like about Groom and the way they've helped me develop this fragrance, the fragrance experts, is you can blend how much you want on your skin. So if you just want a quick, fresh burst, you can wear it straight away. It's a personal choice. If you want your colleagues at work to notice you, you can layer it up. So we've got some oils in there, which will mean the more you put on your skin, the more you're going to experience. So you can get it to last as long as you want. It just depends on how much you put on.
And what sort of success have you had so far in terms of stockists, and, both locally and on a wider market?
We've done very well in Birmingham, and that was deliberate for me to get started here in Birmingham. We've already got into London. We've got a very nice, well written about, bespoke, independent fragrance retailer in London, Really A White. But in Birmingham, the hotel market's been really strong for us. They love the local connection. It really makes them stand out for their customers. So the Hyatt Hotel, Hotel Southen, Malmaison, they've all embraced groom as well. And we have a cracking little barbers run by a guy who's been in the trade 20 years, opened up in Birmingham, and I walked in. Back then I was still a lawyer, I was still part-time, developing groom, and being pushed by a lot of people to get selling, but I thought, look, second chances are hard to come by. I agree with this minimal viable product everyone talks about. I get that idea. But if you're in retail with consumers, they're used to a high standard. On the one hand, they love a startup, like Innocent Smoothie, but if Innocent Smoothie had bad packaging, or it didn't fit, or it was all half full, half empty, and it wasn't, people would have been unimpressed.
That's the thing, there are so many different components to successful business before, but a lot of it is placing it at the right time, right place, in front of the right person, isn't it? And
it
so
is.
You talk about networking when you're out in Thailand. I mean, networking now must be a massive part of what you do.
Huge. I'd almost say a network is a business, or a business is a network. If you even Andy Street from John Lewis ran Groom tomorrow, but by this Christmas it could be the best-selling fragrance in the UK. So your network is really important, and that's one of the reasons I like the fact I started from scratch with Groom. So we both grew together. As my network has improved, so has Groom's. So it's been a really nice experience to get up through the ladder. And collaboration's been key. You see, with brands like the Hyatt, Hotel Southen, Malmaison on board, it helps open those doors. So you've got to be quite strategic early on. What door can I get which will help open others? So it's got credibility, but isn't unattainable. Doesn't take too long.
Where would you hope to be maybe this time next year?
I would like to be in one of the big stores. London is a good place for us. I mean, it's on our doorstep as well. So, but it stands out for the world. So it's a great launch pad to get outside of the UK as well. So the West End of London would be good. If someone like Phoenix, Fortnum's, Liberty were interested in taking Groom, I think that would really show that we're onto that track of becoming the successful brand I think we can become. So we've got a good stronghold here in Birmingham. Now it's time to take it outside.
We'll watch this space, and I have to say thank you very much. You've made the Big Centre TV studio.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed that.
Absolutely terrific.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Time now for another quick break, and we'll also include the latest news update from the Big Centre team. Welcome back. Now, before I meet our final guest this week, how's this for a smart idea? A group of law students in Wolverhampton are gaining valuable work experience by helping local people who are seeking to appeal against decisions about their benefits. Lindsay Smith went along to find out more.
A Wolverhampton Council initiative is offering help to those appealing welfare decisions and providing much needed experience for law students.
So the Welfare Rights Service were aware that there was an ever-increasing number of appeals. So many that the Welfare Rights Service itself couldn't actually handle that number, and we were looking at ways that we could provide representation to claimants, and so therefore we made links with the university to enlist the help of law students. Essentially, law students are representing people who have disability benefit appeals. The role of the law student involves meeting with clients, trying to assert or establish what their entitlements are by looking at their medical records, by looking at the law and making representations based on what evidence they're able to establish and what provisions the law actually make. So far, the project has brought in an extra £638,000 in annualised benefit gains for the people that have been represented by the project. The response has been fantastic, that I think people are just really, really grateful that somebody is there to help them and to support them and to be on their side. I mean, what you have to appreciate is that if there wasn't a law student there, that people would often be relying on having to attend their appeals themselves, that they would be going along, have no knowledge of the legal framework, no knowledge of the legal tests under which they are being assessed.
The students who are about to become involved see the benefit for both their studies and the people they are supporting.
It will give me the legal experience, sort of case handling, interviewing clients and everything. And as far as the clients go, I understand it's helped gather over £600,000 worth of benefits that they were entitled to that they wouldn't have got given this service.
I was asked to get involved by our university lecturers, and because I've worked with vulnerable people in the past, I thought it would be a really useful project to be involved in.
I've always been passionate about helping people who are vulnerable and people who are disabled, and with a background in law and in clinical support work, I just thought it's something I need to do, and I would really enjoy it.
We are here to support them and make them feel like we one of them. We're trying to help them. That's what I think is very important to them as well, because the feeling make them feel they're not alone and they've got somebody who will fight for them.
The council plan to continue training law students in the future. Lindsay Smith for the Midland in Wolverhampton.
I think that's what you call a win-win situation. Now, time to meet my final guest, who's a man who offers financial tips and advice to a wide range of clients, including some celebrities. Wealth manager Frank Cochran from FSC Investments in Wolverhampton. Frank, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We've known each other for a while and talked money on many occasions, but the environment is changing so quickly these days, isn't it?
I mean, the industry that I joined in 1979, compared to what it is now, is light years away. I mean, we had rate books and you sat and spoke to people about their savings, and it was all brand new then, and people hadn't really got into the habit of using financial advisors. If they wanted to get advice on finance, they'd go and see the bank manager, and if they got a lot of money, they'd end up with a stockbroker. Well, today, the role of a wealth manager or an IFA, as they're commonly called, has changed significantly. I mean, you're part solicitor, part accountant. You have to be fully qualified now and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority to be able to trade. So the level of expertise in the marketplace has gone up massively, and it needed to, let's be honest. I mean, there was no regulation up until about 1986. But after that, the regulation kicked in, and the industry we have today is something that I honestly believe we can be truly proud of. It's a fabulous industry.
Do you think the average person in the street knows enough about the type of people that they can go to for advice and exactly what different types of companies offer?
Absolutely not, and that's the biggest challenge that we've got. I mean, some people have said it's lethargy. I don't think it's lethargy. I think everybody would like to be wealthier than they are now. It's a case of, do they truly believe that they have the capital, the finance, or the ability to save on a regular basis to achieve that? And it also comes down to the other big thing, which is trust. You've got to be able to have somebody that you can go to, that you can sit down with and have to excuse the pun, a frank conversation, where the information that's going to be given to you will be in your best interests, so that taking that information and applying it and then managing it will achieve the right financial goals that you want.
Do you think people know more or try to know more about their own money and their own financial situation now than they perhaps used to?
Yeah, I mean, we do get a situation where people come in with ideas that they've picked up off the internet or their mate down the pub or the greengrocer, and 9 times out of 10 I have to say it's completely wrong, because the market is moving forward quite quickly. Every time there's a budget or a mini budget, there are new legislative changes that come into play. Our job is to be the finger on the pulse 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, keeping everything right up to date. I mean, we've got a mantra within the office, which is that our job is to make sure that the client's money is in the right place at the right time, all the time. So we're managing the situation for them so that they can have the peace of mind of knowing that they haven't got to worry about that. It's then outside of their worry circle. They don't have the grief of having to trawl through all the financial papers or the internet to try and find this information. They come along to see us. We do a regular 6-monthly service and review meeting with the client. At that meeting, we do a fact find, so we take all their financial affairs into account. We do a risk analysis, and we make sure that the portfolio or the investments that we put together don't fall outside of that, because you don't want clients having either too much risk where they're uncomfortable, but also you don't want to have too little risk so that they actually don't make any money. There is a nice balancing point, and we've got a particular online computer tool that we use, which is a profiler that very accurately helps us to establish the client's attitude to risk, what experience they have previously with investments. We'll look at the marketplace that they've been used to working in. If they've only been in a bank or a building society, then we need to know that. We need to know the time horizons, so what period of time they want to invest over. And then we take into account a whole load of what we call soft facts. What kind of person are they? What sort of things would spook them? What sort of things would they be comfortable with? How much money do they anticipate making? Are their expectations too high?
What sort of things tend to spook people?
Fear of the unknown. If they've never done it before, it's a case of, well, you know, I've always had my money in the bank or building society. Now only getting 1.5% from that money. And in many cases, they're forced to come and see us out of desperation, because with the bank interest rate being held at 0.5%, and
again this week,
and again,
6 years, isn't it now?
I was going to say it's been an enormous amount of time for that to be just flatlining. And with what's been happening in the economic markets, both in Greece, China, North America, and here in the UK, I don't see that there's any possibility of that interest rate rising for quite a few months yet. So these people are locked into this environment where they've been, to a certain extent, they've been hoodwinked into having these golden handcuffs of putting the money in a nice, safe, convenient area in the building society. The difference now is that when they get that statement and they see that the interest they're getting is absolutely negligible, they can't live on it. So they're having to look outside of their, if you like, circle of comfort and say, well, how do we do something? Well, part of my job is to educate them, and we do it in, I think, a nice, friendly way. I mean, we try to allay any fears they've got. We try to make sure that they don't have any misconceived ideas of, you know, we're not purveyors of a black art, we're there to help you. And we talk them through it. And the one thing I think that people will get from us is straightforward, honest advice in English. We don't use jargon, we don't go off onto areas that they're not going to understand.
That's the first thing that turns people off, isn't
of course it does.
Do you think, I mean, if people really want to try and find whatever decent return means on their savings or on their investments at the moment, have they got to go for something that's really high risk?
No, not at all. We work on a benchmarking basis at the office. What we do is slightly different to most firms, where we've actually got the fund management team technically in-house. We've got our own researchers, we've got our own analysts, so we don't outsource that. So in many ways we can be cheaper than everybody else, but we've also got that information at hand 24 hours a day within our office. We haven't got to go and find it. But the point that you make is that if somebody comes along to us and they don't want to take high risk, then my job isn't to force them to take the high risk in the hope of getting an extra interest. My job is to construct a portfolio to give them exactly what they want. If they come and say, look, okay, I want 10% with no risk, I can't do it. If they want 5.5%, 6% with a very, very low risk, yeah, that's achievable. And we're doing that day in, day out. And even with the markets now in the state that they've been with a lot of volatility, people consider volatility to be a bad thing. It isn't. Because as long as you can control the volatility and control the risk, then you've got the ability to go forwards and use that to your advantage. Because if you haven't got volatility and you haven't got movements in the market, there's nowhere for the fund managers to make money. So they're buying at the bottom, sell at the top, buy at the bottom, sell at the top. My job is to find the right managers and marry the client with the right fund manager so that they get the balance right and they don't take more risk than they need.
We've been reviewing the papers tonight, and of course the one thing that tends to happen, I think back end of last week, there was all this fear that China was imploding and it was impacting on world markets, and suddenly that's when stories make their way from the business pages onto the front pages and onto the news bulletins. Do you get a sort of avalanche of clients then saying, Frank, what's going on?
If we did, I'd be very worried because we haven't educated them right. One thing that we have got the advantage of, because we've got our own researchers, is that what you're talking about is the froth on the top of the market. That's what's happened. It's the after event. It's the thing that's it's the end result of what's been happening previously. Now, the whole reason that we're in this sort of a situation where China is, if you like, imploding, as you say, is it all started when Barack Obama went to the OPEC countries and said, look, we're having a bit of a problem because Mr. Putin's rattling his sabre and he wants to come down from Russia and he wants to build this pipeline and he's going to start supplying oil at a very cheap rate. That wouldn't be good for the OPEC countries and it wouldn't be good for America. So he approached the OPEC countries and said, can we basically not turn the tap down? Let's keep the oil price dropping so that it makes Putin's oil very expensive. That takes away his incentive then to try and build this oil line, and it also means that the economy in Russia starts to shrink, which is what's happened. The natural then knock-on of that is that one of Russia's biggest trading partners is China. So if Russia isn't putting money into China to buy goods and services and materials from them, it's a natural conclusion that China's going to start to, if you like, contract as well, which Obama's been very clever because China was and still is the second largest economy in the world, and it was closely starting to catch up with the Americans. So in one fell swoop, he's put Mr. Putin back in his box, and he's really quietened down his biggest competitor. So he's done a great job, but it's nothing that we didn't expect. We knew this was coming. We didn't know when, but we knew it was going to come. So what we've been doing with our portfolios is rebalance them to take the risk out of that. So guess the two areas that we're not investing in. We're not investing in Russia, we're not investing in China.
Yeah. It doesn't take, when you break it down like that, it doesn't take a brain surgeon.
Well, it's common sense, isn't it? But we do it every day, that's the thing.
Is there do you have to take a judgment sometimes about how much information clients want to know? I mean, obviously, you know a lot about their investments. Some clients will want to know more about it than others, won't they? And
I mean,
what sort of things do people tend to ask you? What do you?
We get asked everything. I mean, some clients, they'll want to know chapter and verse, and my job is to walk them through the investment, walk them through the process to the stage where they turn around and say, do you know what, I really understand that. Once they've done that and once I've got that feedback from them, I'm confident that we're on the right path. Now, we also give them a completely black and white written report on what we're doing. We ask them to take it away, we ask them to read it, we ask them to give us feedback on it, and we use that then as a working document. Because there's never a situation that I've come across yet where a client's walked through the door, we've done the fact find, we've done the risk analysis, we've made the report and they've said, that's it, we've done that all in one go. It is a process, and it's not a job where you know where the end game is going to be.
It's building a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, but the big thing is we don't know when somebody's going to die. The trick is we don't want somebody to live too long, we don't want them to die too soon. And the whole thing is that we have to make sure that they're financially secure. From the day they walk through our offices until the day we get the phone call to say, I'm ever so sorry, but my dad passed away. You were his financial advisor. What do we do? So our job is to really give them the support and the help so that no matter what hits them, they don't have to worry. We're there to make sure that it's worked properly.
I must ask you, because I know one of the sort of sidelines that developed, if you like, in your business is becoming a man with a bit of a reputation for offering independent financial advice to celebrities, professional sports people. Yeah. How did that come about?
We had a number of football players that we dealt with, and a few of them had contacts within the celebrity world. I was introduced to a couple of agents. The agents then found out what we were doing. A couple of PR companies that we dealt with, they got in touch with us and said, look, as a PR agent, for instance, part of their job is to get a fresh, new, young star to work on them, build them up, and then protect them. And they said, well, we could do with somebody that would help us to protect them financially, because these people have come from all sorts of different backgrounds. They've not all come from gifted backgrounds where mum and dad have got a lot of money, so they've been used to being around that. They're completely lost.
There isn't a gradual, is there? Suddenly they go from this
it's bang.
to this.
It's there straight away. Yeah. It's the same with young football players. Yeah. They can be playing in a lower league side. All of a sudden they're seen by a club. They get a big signing on fee. Their wages can go from like sort of a £350 a week to $35,000 a week. And so that level of stress that it brings does cause problems. I quite often say to some of the young football players that we talk to, look, a 16-year-old with no money isn't really dangerous. A 17-year-old with 35 grand a week is very dangerous, because he just doesn't know what to do with it. And they can be a target for friends from their past who come along and say, look, I've got this great idea, I want to buy a car showroom, will you fund me? Part of him says, well, I'm very fortunate that I'm getting this money, so yeah, it's not going to hurt me to give him this £200,000-300,000. But it's the fastest way to lose a friend. Because if that guy's never had any experience of running a car business before, and the money runs out and he makes a failure of it, you never see him again. He's not going to admit his failure. So we try and help to if you like, barrier them from that sort of thing.
It's understanding the difference in environment, isn't it, really? Frank, we could talk all night. I must have you back in the Big Centre studio. We must have you back again to talk money again.
Yeah,
Next
I'd love
time
to.
China makes its way onto the front page, you're the first person I'm going to call.
I look forward to
coming
it.
in.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
Frank. Well, finally this week, I promised you something for the weekend, and since I'm Big Centre TV's movie man, I thought it would be remiss of me not to kick this series off with a couple of films. So, if you're off out to the cinema this weekend, Tom Hardy plays not one but two of the fearsome Cray twins in the new release Legend. Very brutal, bloodthirsty 18 certificate film which packs a few punches. Something a bit more family friendly you might like the Maze Runner movie, the second in the series, which is The Scorched Trials. Is probably your best bet this week. They're a group of teenagers with amnesia who find themselves in a whole new pile of peril. But if you prefer to recline your armchair and watch your movies at home, I'll leave you with the weekend's big new DVD release. It's the superhero movie with more superheroes than you can shake a stick at. Avengers: Age of Ultron. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
I was designed to save the world. People will look to the sky and see hope. I'll take that from them first. There's only one path to peace. Their extinction.
I tried to create a suit of armor around the world, but I created something terrible. Artificial intelligence. It's called the Ultron program. I'm sick of watching people pay for our mistakes. Isn't why we fight so we can end the fight and go home?
Well, you amazingly failed.
Here we all are. Nothing but our wit and our will to save the world. So stand and fight.
No way we all get through this. I got no plans tomorrow night.
I'm always picking up after you boys.
We can tear them apart. From the inside.
That's the best you can do!
You had to ask.